Good afternoon and welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here, very, very much. I'm John Bennett. Most of you probably know me by now. And I thought that this afternoon I would start with a very quick, brief, kind of big picture overview of where we are, what this process is, where we are in it, and what the next and towards the final steps will be. They're basically, if you boil this down from a 30,000 foot altitude, which is not a bad metaphor for this work, there are really three steps, in essence, that we're following to create our recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners. Step one is to identify the key community values that we think should be reflected in our future airport. And this is what we did on April 29th. Most of you were at that meeting, and it was a very productive, I will say, extremely good meeting. The second is to take those values and express them as tangible directions and goals, planning directions and goals for a new airport. And, so we began that last month in July with a continuum exercises we did on growth in commercial enplanements, air quality, and noise. And if I can get this to advance, the next step will be to set goals the same way, following the same approach we did in July, to set those kinds of goals and directions for commercial air service, general aviation, user experience, ground connectivity, and architecture and design. The third big step will be to take these directions and goals and use them to guide our specific airport recommendations. That, of course, is the holy grail that we're going to get to. And I will add finally that underlying all of this, the foundation for all of this, is a constant process of information and data gathering. We want this to be a data-informed process. So looking at, sorry, put that somewhere else. Looking at the information gathering process that we're in the middle of, in February we had the introduction to this process and also a whole lot of history and background on the airport itself. In March, we went through FAA requirements and heard from a former chief counsel for the FAA and others who talked about those. In May, we listened to presentations on regional growth trends and air service industry trends. In June, we had our airspace safety program at the high school with 3 airspace safety experts sharing their knowledge with us. Today, this afternoon and this evening, we'll hear airline perspectives on air service to and from the Aspen Airport. And the next step in this that we're going to dive right into after this meeting will be research assignments. We want to divide up specific strategic questions among the 4 working groups and the focus group. And those, I'll come back to this in a moment. Those will feed directly into the final step of this process. Also, in the autumn, we don't have a date for this yet, we want to have a Future of Aviation Symposium, hopefully at the Aspen Institute, hopefully with some really top-notch technology experts from around the country, talking to us about what we can expect in the aircraft of 10, 20, and 30 years from now, which may look and perform quite different from the aircraft we know today. So here are the goals and planning directions and goals that we have established so far in this process. And again, these are expressions of the values that came from the April 29th meeting. The first is commercial enplanement growth, and what we've heard is limited growth, around 0.8%. So it's growth, but it's quite constrained. By the way, if you want to see the actual dot voting that we all did on this, they're on these various charts. Enplanement growth are on those 2 charts, noise is behind me, and air quality is against that wall. The second is noise, and as you can see from this dot voting, it was, I won't say unanimous, but there was a pretty widespread agreement that we want a substantial reduction in terms of noise from airplanes on the ground and in the air. CO2 and other forms of air pollution. Once again, the pretty widespread agreement was that we would like to see as a community a substantial reduction in air pollution, which means a substantial improvement in air quality. So the immediate next steps in this process after this meeting will be the strategic questions that we want to divide up among the various working groups. And here are examples. What is the fleet mix we need to achieve the commercial employment, noise, and air pollution reduction goals that we have set? What might our future airport look like in terms of safety and design, again, in light of these goals and planning directions? What would a warm, welcoming, and comfortable terminal look like? And that language is directly out of the April 29th values. How could we create more convenient and easy ground transportation? Again, language from the values we established. And lastly, how does this airport fit into our community and reflect our community? So this is that very first slide again. This is the overview of the 3 key steps. And we are, again, sort of right in this. We're about to be diving into the future goal setting, and it is those questions, again, these strategic questions, that are going to inform this part of this next stage of our work together. And it will basically help us set those goals and planning directions in these remaining areas of airport design. Once that work is done, and I view this as the major work still remaining ahead of us, we will, of course, wrap this up with specific airport recommendations. But in truth, and if we do this right, our hope is that if we get this part, the final conclusion, will be a whole lot more straightforward and perhaps less time-consuming, we hope, we'll see, than what came before. Because the meat of the work is what we started in July and are going to be doing over the next couple of months. And if we get this right, again, what we're going to be presenting to the county commissioners will be a plan for an airport that is both values-based and data-informed. And that is, I would say that's fairly rare for a small community of Aspen-Pitkin County size to go through the brain damage and number of meetings and number of hours in meetings to plan a future airport. But we're not an ordinary community, as we all know. So thank you again. I'll end where I began. Thank you all very, very much for being here. This process will not work without your active engagement. We're well into it now, and I think the most important and most interesting part is what we're moving directly into next. So thank you very much.
Hi. So I'm Jacky Francis, and I'm going to be moderating the panel that we're going to have today. And the panelists have all been aware of what we have around the room and where this community sits on these kind of issues. And we are now going to grill them on what they think of these things. Ms. from United Airlines is delayed. Can anybody guess what happened to Ms.? Yeah. He was delayed coming in from Denver, so he'll be here as soon as he can get here. I'd like to bring the other panelists up. We've had some kind of sort of crazy changes in who's going to be on the panel, so my notes keep changing, and because of that, a couple things. So SkyWest has given us some written comments, and Mike Herman from Kimley Horn is going to be reading the SkyWest responses. We also, when we have some questions, have Heidi Koher and Barbara Oshotsky that will be able to answer some things depending on what the question is. But the rest of these guys, I'm going to let them introduce themselves with their name and their title because, like I said, everything changed on my notes. So Mike is on the end, Mike Herman, and you guys have all probably met Mike. So I'll let you guys go from there.
My name is Danny Ortiz. I'm the general manager for American Airlines here in Aspen.
My name is Joe Hughes. I'm the Regional Director of Government Affairs for American Airlines based in Phoenix.
And my name is Paul Amon. I'm also from Phoenix. I'm our Manager of Air Traffic Management and Airfield Operations for American Airlines.
All right, thanks you guys for being here. And I didn't say my name. I'm Jacky Francis, and I am with you guys in the community process. So we're all in this together. So let's start with some of the questions that you guys have already kind of had a chance to look at. What safety investments or training do you require over and above FAA requirements to operate in and out of the Aspen-Pickens County Airport?
Okay, so this is directed at SkyWest specifically. Every SkyWest pilot that flies into Aspen receives additional qualifications specific to the airport. In addition to enhanced simulator training on approach procedures and the steps to take in the event of a missed approach or landing, they're also required to review these procedures every 12 months as part of their recurrent training. They're also required to observe an arrival and departure in Aspen from the jump seat to further enhance their familiarization with the procedures. Before every flight into Aspen, pilots are required to brief on all contingency plans, and they receive simulator training every 12 months to review all scenarios. We're also in the process of developing an enhanced proficiency program where pilots will be flying into Aspen on an even more regular basis above and beyond their current FAA requirement.
Now, these responses will be available online on the website if you didn't catch all that, but, and questions can be asked later. Now, would any of you guys like to add anything to that question? Jump right in.
I used to do, can you hear me okay? Will this go on?
No, it's not. Here, give me that one. I can yell.
Well, so can I. Can you guys hear me okay?
If the mic works, it's better
Well,
for the
okay, how about
TV.
this?
Yeah.
What SkyWest said is exactly right. I used to do flight training for American Airlines, and there is some FAA mandated requirements for a special qualification. So that's a very accurate statement by SkyWest.
Great. Does anyone else want to add anything? Okay, so we all know there are weather challenges in Aspen. How does this impact your operational strategy, i.e. number of flights, frequency, contingency plans for diverted flights, etc.?
So we plan a schedule based off of many things. Weather is something that we really can't factor in. So what we do is we just have contingency plans. American in specific, we usually attempt to divert to Grand Junction if we can't make it into Aspen due to weather concerns. From there, we have a bus system set up that gets passengers up here to Aspen just as quickly and safely as possible. As far as what forces us to divert kind of falls into SkyWest. SkyWest is a paid operator for American Airlines here in Aspen. So we let the dispatch team and the pilots handle what the safe minimums are, and then we just make sure the passengers are taken care of and get them to their final destination just as quickly as possible.
So SkyWest is very similar to that. SkyWest has extensive experience operating in Aspen, and we have developed several strategies with our partners to help mitigate disruption due to weather challenges. This includes identifying potential diversion cities if needed, and a busing operation from Grand Junction or Denver. If the weather forecast indicates flights may not be able to take off or land in Aspen, our Operations Control Center will work directly with both Aspen and any potential diversion city to coordinate busing for passengers and their luggage. In the event a flight is canceled, passengers are rebooked on later flights or may be provided with vouchers to use for ground transportation.
All right. Anything else you guys want to add? So what is it like to operate in and out of Aspen? How does operating in and out of Aspen compare to similar airports like Tahoe, Jackson Hole, Telluride, or even Eagle?
So operating in and out of Aspen is very difficult to compare to other operations. Telluride and Tahoe, we're thinking, you guys are talking about Tahoe Regional Airport, not Reno Tahoe. But both of those are much smaller operations that we currently do not operate into. Jackson Hole, we have both mainline and regional service into Jackson Hole. As far as what it's like comparative between Aspen and Jackson Hole, just kind of some of the bigger things that stick out is available facilities and the ability to operate both mainline and regional aircrafts. There in Jackson Hole, we do a mix of regional and mainline aircrafts. So depending on the time of the year and demand of the time of the year, we operate different types of equipment. So it's not strictly one type of aircraft that operates in there throughout the year. We kind of vary the time of the day and the demand of the season on which type of aircraft we might use. As far as facilities go, personally never worked in the Jackson Hole Airport, but the facilities are kind of gauged with the airport's need. So as far as passenger holding room, ticketing room, things like that, you know, it seems that they have the space available to kind of meet the demand brought in by aircrafts. Here in Aspen, depending on the peak times of the year or different holidays, the current facilities are certainly very constrained on being able to meet the current demand of air traffic service. So I think that's kind of the biggest difference that sets us apart from Jackson Hole, is just the facilities available are certainly lacking just for our current level of service.
Yep. So SkyWest has invested significant resources in developing operations and procedures to provide safe, reliable air service into Aspen. Aspen is a challenging airport due to the surrounding terrain and its position within the valley, which also creates challenging winds and rapidly changing weather conditions. Conditions that are reported as calm and clear have been known to change within 5 to 8 minutes. Looking at other nearby airports, Jackson Hole is also in a mountainous area, but has a long north-south valley that allows for normal instrument landings approach. Eagle is similar to Aspen, but with surrounding terrain that is different.
And I'll add from a cockpit perspective that there is obviously some similarities when it comes to how you prepare to land in a mountainous airport versus Wichita, Kansas, for example. And so definitely you have some of your better trained and additionally trained pilots, as was talked about in the very first question, that will come into whether it be Aspen or Tegucigalpa, Honduras, or Jackson Hole, or any airport. It requires a little bit more pre-flight preparation, additional training, and a lot of times you don't go in there the first time as the pilot in command. You may go in a couple times as the second in command until you're familiar with that airport before you are given the authorization to go as the pilot in command. So that part of it is similar from a training and certification standpoint.
Great. Okay, so why do you provide service only at peak times or limited periods during the day? Why not spread out throughout the day?
Okay, I'll go ahead and take that one. American Airlines serves 1,000 destinations throughout the world when you take in our codeshare partners. Because of that, we're building our routes and our schedules from the hubs. That's where everyone connects, be that Phoenix, LA, Dallas, Chicago. And so we build around that. That's where the people are going to get together and get on the plane that comes to Aspen. And so we have to build from there out, not from Aspen back to the hub, if that makes any sense. Because if someone's coming from Louisville to here and we have a 3-hour layover in Dallas, they won't take the flight. They're just not going to do it. Or we don't want to have them have a 15-minute connection in Dallas either, so they're running through the airport. That's not good for either side. So we build from the hubs, and that's why the schedules are more compact as opposed to being more spread out.
Mike, do you have anything from United?
SkyWest just says Aspen flight schedules are determined by their mainline partners. So.
It's all our fault.
Okay, so now those were the questions about operations or operating it in Aspen, Picking County. So the next questions are about future aircraft. How do you analyze potential future aircraft operating in a market in terms of safety and deployment? What is unique about operating at the Aspen Airport that affects this analysis?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, through the history of time, airplanes, the next generation of airplane that comes along is always safer, more efficient, usually quieter, as well as more fuel efficient as well. I probably already said that. So I think going forward, the type of equipment, regardless of the size of it, is going to be something that's going to give the passenger a better experience, as well as, I mean, I'm just using facts like an Airbus A321 from the first one to the most recent model. They're getting quieter, the engines are quieter, and in most cases, I'm not going to include the MAX, the 737 MAX at the discussion at this point, but Obviously, airplanes have gotten safer over time. Obviously, compared to like the Wright Flyer to where we are today, the obvious improvements can't be in safety. So you will always see that going forward into the future with whatever equipment we bring in here.
Do you want to add anything about what's unique about operating in Aspen that affects this analysis?
Well, you certainly want to bring in an airplane that can clear the mountains, you know, and so obviously there are certain limitations to what kind of equipment you can fly in here just from a performance, their takeoff performance perspectives. And so, you know, you have choices. When you have an obstacle you have to clear, you certainly don't want to laden it with a lot of gas that would affect that performance. But there's hundreds of factors that go into aircraft performance, whether it be the temperature, the elevation, the amount of fuel. A lot of people don't realize the amount of fuel you need at your destination. So if you're flying to an airport that has thunderstorms all around it and you may be required to hold or deviate around the thunderstorms to get to that destination, that means you got to put on more fuel, which makes the airplane heavier taking off from Aspen or wherever you're departing from. So those are all factors that go into it regardless of the type of airplane. I don't know if that answered your question or not. Yes, sir. Could I add to that? Sure. Go ahead.
We're gonna call a friend, use a lifeline here.
Sorry, I'm also with American Airlines, but I was letting these gentlemen handle most of it. I just wanted to add one thing that is very unique to Aspen, and that's the 95-foot wingspan limitation. And currently, right now, as you know, all the carriers are operating CRJ700s into this airport. Part of that is due to the wingspan limitation, the weight limitation, and the performance of the aircraft. So that is a contributing factor. And if you look at potential aircraft that are in the fleets of the airlines today that are potential replacements going down the road, and you have to remember the CRJ700 is no longer in production. So available aircraft in the fleets today that would meet future demand as the CRJ700s leave the fleet, they start exceeding the current limitation on the wingspan. And the second generation aircraft of the Embraer 170s, 175s, they get above the 95-foot wingspan. That'd be typically, that's one of the aircraft that happens to be in most of the fleets that you know, we think we would love to see that replace it. But in order to make that happen, we have to have the 95-foot wingspan retracted. Something has to happen to the wingspan limitation here in Aspen. So I think that's one of the very unique things here in Aspen that we do have to take into consideration, and that I hope that as the community looks at what they want to do going forward, that you do keep that in mind, that there are certain physical limitations with the aircraft and with what the runway is currently allowed to take and accept in terms of arrivals and departures, and factor that into any decision-making process that goes forward.
Mike, did you have anything from SkyWest you needed to add?
Nothing from SkyWest.
Okay, so Lauren just jumped ahead on my next question, which is, I'm going to say it anyway just because, you know, what is your airline's current retirement horizon for the CRJ700 fleet serving the Aspen Airport? And the first part of this is, if the airfield stays in its current state, limited to 95-foot wingspans and 100,000 pound max weight, what aircraft would you expect to operate at the Aspen Airport after the CRJ700 is retired?
Well,
Get your crystal ball.
right. It may be that we would have to take an airplane that we would not, at other locations, and I'm trying to think here a little bit, where we may have to reduce the number of seats on the plane, just literally configure the airplane different than the rest of the fleet. And we prefer not to do that because obviously we want to keep it standardized. But if the 95-foot was not changed, you're going to kind of handcuff the operators, especially the scheduled carriers, as those CRJ700s go away. What else can we bring in? Well, it just may not be the ideal suited airplane for this. It's, you know, and again, it may be the manufacturers will come up with something that will work. But a lot of times I know, I'm thinking of other airports. Dallas Love Field had a 65 seat at one point restriction. I think it was 65, or was it 50? I don't remember what the number was. And literally American Airlines, if we wanted to fly out of Dallas, we had to rip the seats out of a certain airframe and use that airplane only in the Dallas Love market, which is not efficient from a But that's what we had to do if we wanted to go to Dallas Love, because that was a federal restriction that required, I think it was part of the Wright Amendment actually. And so, a certain percentage of that particular fleet, it was the F-100s, we had to take seats out of it so that we could meet that. So it would be some kind of modification to an airplane that we would normally fly everywhere else so that the crew's qualified to fly it. The number of seats doesn't affect the crew qualification generally in the back of the airplane, but at the same time it means taking that airplane that on its next leg where we could have a full allotment of seats, for example, we now can't do that because obviously the seats aren't in the airplane. So it leads to inefficiencies from a scheduling and an operational perspective.
So I see a hand go up. We're going to wait till the end to take questions. So if you need a pen or something like that to write down your questions so you don't forget, go ahead and see if Melissa or somebody can get you something to write on. Just because I want to make sure we get through the questions up here before I take them from all you guys. Did you want to add anything, Mike, on the
Nothing
Okay.
from SkyWest.
on the SkyWest stuff? Okay, so if the airfield were permitted to accommodate only Airplane Design Group 2 aircraft, which aircraft would you expect to operate at Pickens County Airport after the CRJ700 is retired? That's
Yeah, it's sort of the same answer. Maybe that's a hard one to determine. Honestly, that's something that we probably haven't looked at with a level, I would say, this is definitely what we're going to do. We would hope that by that time that happens, when the CRJ700s are no longer available, that either we have another airframe that still meets the criteria of this airport that we can use, or again, going back to what I said before, making some kind of adjustment to an airplane that is already in our fleet that already meets the criteria, well, meets some of the criteria, but then meets the rest of the criteria, if it means a weight limitation or something like that.
Perhaps this is something that comes out of your
Yeah.
autumn session, that you guys have some ideas on that.
That'd be interesting if stuff comes up.
Right.
We have the same question as with Airplane Design Group 3 requirements. What aircraft would your airline serve Pickens County Airport with? And I assume the answer.
Well, Design Group 3 is different because there's several airplanes in our fleet, several fleet types that meet that Design Group 3 criteria. ADG 3 would include 737s, most narrow-body Airbus 319s, 320s. However, that's by definition a Design Group 3, but that doesn't mean it meets the weight restrictions. So there's more to it than just the Design Group 3 criteria. That may not still be at a suitable airplane if you have a 100,000-pound weight limit. Even an MD-80, normally full, would be 120,000 pounds. Now, we wouldn't want that airplane in here just because of its performance, but that's a smaller, narrow-body airplane that is still too heavy to come into based on the 100,000 limitation. So, that's a Design Group 3 airplane that still couldn't come in here.
Mike, do you guys have any?
Nothing from SkyWest.
Okay. So based on the industry and local air service trends discussed today, how do you envision operating at the Aspen Airport 20 to 30 years from now? What are you thinking about in terms of future service into Aspen? What type of aircraft would you project serving Aspen 20 or 30 years from now?
This is where the crystal ball comes out. Because, 20 and 30 years, I wish I knew what I was going to be doing 20 and 30 years from now, or 5 years from now. I think that's a really difficult question to answer, given that the industry is that dynamic. I remember a few years ago, he was talking about the MD-80, and we talked about how it's this new bird that's going to be great. Well, now we're rolling it out of our fleet. We're not going to use that anymore because the fleet is continuing to evolve. And for me today to say what's going to be in 30 years, I don't think I have a good, my guess would be as good as anyone's in this room.
But we obviously were here because, Aspen is an important market for us. And so I would assume that and I'm not speaking for the other carriers, and I'm just assuming that we're going to want to continue service here. Why wouldn't we?
Beautiful community.
Yeah, it's a great place, and we think there's value in this community. So we're certainly going to try to work and find solutions. But we're only one part of that whole, you've got all your GA aircraft, you got the other carriers. So, we're all just one piece of the bigger puzzle.
Mm-hmm. So what is unique about Aspen from a market perspective? Would it be feasible to operate a unique fleet aircraft specific to Aspen? And you've already kind of touched on this. Do you want to add anything else to that question?
Ideally, again, it would be great if we could take an airplane that we can fly from Phoenix to Tucson, bring it back to Phoenix, and bring it up to Aspen, and use that same airplane for both markets, because that's better for our business model than to have to narrow down to one particular airplane that we've had to modify just to meet the Aspen requirements. So, we're again looking for standardization, and it makes it easier for marketing. It makes it easier to accommodate the passengers when we have that. There's no confusion or variance into how we manage our customers too when you do that, when you have the standardization.
Yeah, your customers have a level set of expectations for their experience. What product are they going to receive? If it varies market to market, customers don't like that roll of the dice. They like to know what they're paying for, what they're going to get.
So I'd like to add one other thing that's just from a structural issue when it comes to airline operations in general. And that's the fact, if you maintain a separate fleet for a set of a market, a given market, and just pick city A to Aspen and back, you've got pilots that are trained only on that aircraft type. So we have limited resources available in terms of human resources and availability of human capital. So if you look at what one of our biggest challenges in the industry is today, which is acquisition of pilots, it is an inefficient use of the pilot resource to have them stranded flying only one particular city pair, one aircraft type. They're all going to fly one aircraft for what they're certified on, but flying that one aircraft type between just 2 cities or 3 cities straight only to Aspen. So any pilot, say on our CRJ700 that can fly into Aspen can also fly anywhere else we fly the CRJ700s. But that would not be the case if we had pilots dedicated to a specific fleet type specific to Aspen.
Lauren, you might as well sit up here. I mean, there is one more seat for you.
Okay. How will future aircraft choices determine future destinations?
Did SkyWest answer that? Okay. Repeat the question. I think
How will future aircraft choices determine future destinations?
I almost would say it's the other way around. Destinations will affect the aircraft we pick. And if we want to expand in a particular market, and I'm not saying that's Aspen, I'm just saying, let's say we want to go to Africa for the first time as American Airlines. Well, if that's really important to us to go to Africa, we got to make sure we have the right airplane that can do it. And there's issues like cargo and capabilities of the airplanes. We had one market, I'll mention, Tel Aviv to Philadelphia, that was really difficult because of the time slot we had. When that airplane would come across the North Atlantic, it was actually going the opposite direction of all the other flights. And so you're going the wrong way on a one-way street. So we either had to go below the tracks, above the tracks, left or right, which was not efficient, and we couldn't take the cargo out of there we wanted to. So until we got a better equipped airplane that it could either take the cargo we wanted and all the passengers and not leave them behind, it wasn't an efficient and a logical destination for us to fly to. So if we really wanted to go back there, and now that we have the 787, we can. So that's probably a better answer, just using that as an example versus, trying to be too specific about Aspen or any particular market.
And I would also add that really what you're looking at is not, if you're thinking in terms of service from Aspen to Louisville, Kentucky, or City X, that really isn't a driving factor, because what we're really looking at is the ability to get customers from Aspen to our connecting hubs, to make those connections to get around the world. So that's really what drives the need for the aircraft in the particular market, is what we can get back to our hubs to get people to where they're really going. Because the folks in Aspen aren't just going to Dallas or Chicago or Los Angeles. They're going beyond that into one of those thousand destinations, and that's what drives the decision.
So this is a kind of related question. Would making the Aspen Airport a full Airplane Design Group 3 airport make you consider using it as a regional hub?
I do not believe we would use it as a hub, but I don't know the future on this, and I really don't want to comment too much on that.
Yeah, we're not in the position to determine if it's going to be a regional hub or not, but if you had a full Design Group 3 airport here, you might be able to get a couple extra flights to locations that you currently can't go to, such as the East Coast somewhere. If you have enough customers who really like that nonstop, there may be a demand for that, and by having that capability, we can fill that demand if it's there and they want to do it. If you leave it to Design Group 2, that particular market is still unreachable basically from here.
Right. Did SkyWest have some comments on that? Okay. How or will the scope clause affect future aircraft choices? I think you might want to say something about what the scope clause is, because I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, which scope? Because are you talking, there's scope clauses in contracts, in pilot contracts, or?
Probably seats.
Oh, okay.
Not my question, but I would guess that's it.
Well, we sort of already touched on that. You mean as far as, and repeat the question again, I'm sorry.
How or will the scope clause affect future aircraft choices?
So there is a local scope clause here that says there are only so many seats.
No, it's your regional scope.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Pilot's scope clause.
Oh, okay.
Regional planes, 50 passengers,
Yeah,
that one.
I got you. Boy, that's a,
Yeah.
yeah. For example, in the negotiation that our mainline pilots have with the company, we don't, nor our APA pilots union, our bargaining agreement unit there, sets a standard that says that, pilots at SkyWest or Mesa or any other regional carrier operating on behalf of American Airlines can only fly a certain size airplane because they're not necessarily represented by the same bargaining group that we are. So we're not going to let SkyWest or any other regional carriers pilots fly a 175-seat airplane in Aspen if that were the day would ever come. That if a plane that size were to come in here, it would have to be flown by American Airlines pilots is basically what that scope clause is. So obviously at some point you get to a lot, if that ever happened that we had a larger airplane coming in here, then you'd be flying with mainline American Airlines pilots versus very experienced but employed by regional carriers.
Okay, so the next questions are titled Environment. Does your airline have any goals related to climate change and emissions? If so, what are your airline's goals to reduce emissions and over what time frame? What strategies is your airline pursuing? What, if any, improvements at the Aspen Airport would most help achieve these goals?
So I'd like to kind of delve into that question. There's multiple pieces to that question. So if you could start the question again, I'm going to stop you in certain spots and try to respond to that, if that's okay.
So the overall question is, does your airline have any goals related to climate change and emissions?
So in a general sense, yes, we very much do. We definitely believe in being a good environmental steward. And to that end, we believe in partnering with the communities we serve, and we believe in acting proactively to look at alternative means of providing the services we provide that reduce our overall carbon footprint. And as we get more into the question, I'll get into the specifics of that. Go to the next section.
What are your airline's goals to reduce emissions and over what time frame?
Okay, so I cannot comment on the specific goal because I'm not part of our environmental team. I will tell you, we have an entire team dedicated to this though. And so I'm going to kind of move into the couple what I remember from the rest of the question and tell you there's some things or steps that we are taking that are vital to achieving our goal of reducing our overall carbon footprint. And one of the first things we're doing is we're looking at biofuels and how we can operate and make those a part of our everyday operation. That's one thing that we're doing right away. The other thing we're doing is we're reducing the use of plastics on board our flights and on the ground, wherever possible. We are also increasing our recycling opportunities both on board and in the ground. And I'll tell you, we just happened in Dallas, I just happened to move into our new headquarters building, and we don't have a lot of trash cans anymore. It's almost all different kinds of recycling. So it's quite impressive what we've done there. To that end, we get into the facility issue and the terminal. And any new terminal, and we want to partner with you all in making this happen, but it should be an efficient, energy efficient design. And I want to talk about a couple things that are important in today's terminal that we would really like to see changed going forward. For one thing, we like to use electric ground service equipment when possible, but that isn't possible here in Aspen today. One, we do not have an appropriate amount of electricity or power feed coming in to the existing terminal. And we also do not have a ramp that is conducive to that is always conducive to using that. So instead, we're having to use diesel equipment. Okay, there's a huge difference in the carbon footprint there. And let's talk about another environmental concern that I've noticed on the board, noise. Electric ground equipment is much less noisy. So if the infrastructure is installed that allows us to use electric ground service equipment, we can not only reduce the carbon emissions here in the valley, we can reduce the noise emissions off of the ramp as well, and reduce the amount of time we're running APUs, auxiliary power units, on the aircraft. So there's a bunch of different things that we can do here today in the design. I would also stress one thing that is very interesting, and I'll let you talk, Paul, I'm sorry, I tend to go on, is that one of the concerns that I happen to read about as part of this visioning process is that the community has expressed concerns about jet bridges and how that might affect the aesthetics and the feel of the airport. And I certainly understand and commiserate with you that what you're trying to achieve. But one thing that is good about the potential for use of jet bridges or some kind of ground covered boarding is that we can hang ground equipment from those bridges that are electric. So preconditioned air, whether that's heat or air conditioning, can sit on that bridge, again, running on electricity, not on diesel. The same thing for the power to run the aircraft. So again, we're not running auxiliary power units. There's a bunch of different things, and it also provides one additional huge thing. We talked about safety earlier. One thing we didn't touch on was actual ground safety and the fact that right now, uncovered boarding, we have passengers walking across the ramp and ice. And some sort of covered boarding is actually a safer option for the customers, and it is much more comfortable in terms of the fact that we can provide an air-conditioned or heated space. So all of those things not help the environment, help the customer experience, and help our environmental stewardship. And
not to mention give a positive impression about Aspen from the second they walk off the airplane. You know, and one thing I've been in some other conferences. We want the customer experience to be not just the part on the airplane that's a great experience, but from the second they walk or they come onto the airport property, they get on the airplane to the destination, they get off the airplane, they get their bags, and they drive or walk out from that airport. We obviously have a vested interest in that positive experience for the customer from the beginning all the way to the end. I can't tell you how many times I've been with a customer on an elevator at an airport, and that elevator's slow or it's kind of jerky, and they goes, God, this American Airlines elevator. And you know, so we're part of that. We're part of that process, whether it's our equipment or not. So, you know, we want to do this in collaborative. We want to be a part of the, we want to be good neighbors with that as well, too, I guess is the best way to say that. Now, going back in my area of expertise, the FAA is taking very seriously, how many of you have heard the term next gen? And maybe some of the new principles of next gen where instead of having to fly low and slow with your flaps and everything extended, and you're coming in and because you're dragging all that extra with your flaps and slats out and the gear down longer, it just means you're pushing the engines up to push that airplane through, and that adds more noise. Well, the FAA has taken very seriously what we call basically the new RNAV kind of criteria, where we minimize that low and slow, and the FAA is the lead on that, and the airlines just go where they tell us we go where the FAA tells us to go. But at the same time, we support that as well too, because it's not just in Aspen, but it's everywhere, where we're trying to minimize extra miles flown, which reduces greenhouse gases, and using some of the newer technology that allows those kind of capabilities where we can stay a little higher, a little longer, and maybe not have to, like I said, drag an airplane through at a lower altitude. Those are all things the FAA is pushing to improve the environment, both from a noise and greenhouse gas. And of course, if that's how they're going to design the airspace, we're going to fly it that way. But we're certainly on board when it comes to those benefits.
Mike, did SkyWest have some comments? Okay. This is easy for you, huh? Okay. Does your airline have any goals related to reducing the noise impacts from takeoffs and landings at the Aspen Airport? And if so, what are your airline's goals to reduce noise impacts and over what time frame? What strategies is your airline pursuing? What, if any, improvements at the Aspen Airport would most help achieve these goals? So it's the same question, just about the noise impacts.
Well, we've sort of answered that already. New airplanes will be quieter. New airspace procedures at the FAA will make it quieter. You know, in some cases where airplanes don't have to run all that ground equipment, the APUs, where we have alternatives to running the APUs, will make it quieter. So we're all those little things, but I don't think I'm kidding anybody here if I say, or I'm not, everybody's definition of noise is different. So what you might think is quiet, somebody over here might think is not quiet enough. So that's a very difficult target to quantify and say that's what you want. All we can do is just try to make some general steps to improve that, whatever level that is, as we keep going forward, and hopefully most, if not all, of the residents in the community will see that those improvements are being made. And it's not just American Airlines, it's all the carriers, including the general aviation as well, too.
I'd like to tie that back to the whole 95-foot wingspan issue, because as we get into the newer generation aircraft and what's available, what you're looking at is what are called the high bypass engines that are more fuel efficient. We're back to the environmental stewardship, and we're talking about significantly less noise. So if you tie the desire of the community to reduce noise from the airport, it becomes rather important that the 95-foot wingspan be relaxed. And so I would just encourage you to look at that as an option, as an opportunity to help achieve some of the other goals that you would like to see happen.
I'm noticing on my questions about the environment that there really isn't anything about the air quality, which is obviously one of the issues that we talked about. So can I ask that same question basically about the air quality, and will that change at all with like biofuels or any kind of new generation of fuels? Because we do definitely have an issue in this community about what the air quality, like we don't really know. We don't know what the air quality, what's happening there, and would that improve with newer generation aircraft?
Yes.
Yes, it's going to improve. And the thing I think that's important to remember is if you look at on a per person carbon footprint, how much carbon is being generated on a per person basis, we're flying 76-seat aircraft in and out of here right now. I guarantee you those two jet engines flying that 76-seat aircraft out of this airport on a per person basis, we have a significantly smaller carbon footprint than we would if we were flying two people out on, say, a different twin-engine jet. So I think that our goals are to, as I mentioned earlier, continue to look at what the next generation brings, the high bypass fan engines, the use of biofuels, that sort of thing. And I circle back to the use of electricity where we can, which again is related to what the improvements that are necessary in the facility itself. And those are the sort of things that will allow the community to see a true positive environmental impact on our part from the commercial sector.
Okay, so we're moving to the terminal and the passenger experience. Does the Aspen Airport terminal meet your airlines and passenger needs? What's working well? What are the biggest challenges that you would like to see addressed?
So I mean, as I kind of touched to earlier, as far as the customer experience goes, you know, that's definitely a huge goal of American Airlines from the point of booking your ticket all the way through to your final destination, getting your bags. We like to provide the highest customer experience that we can. And it's very difficult for us to do so with some of the current facility constraints. I'm sure most of you have flown through Aspen. It definitely has its days where this current facility size is adequate. But through the majority of the winter and our peak summer months, it just cannot support the current operation. So ensuring that our current level of service is maintained and our customer experience is positive, pretty much through and through is very difficult to do here. From the sterile boarding capacity, kind of the ticketing capacity that overflows when the sterile boarding is full, all the way through to your arrival. Arriving in Aspen, we have 2 small conveyor belts coming into the terminal to pick up your checked bags. In the winter times, you can have wait times up over 45 minutes waiting for bags just because there's a backlog of bags trying to get into the terminal. So pretty much from the start of your experience in the airport currently through to your arrival, it leaves a lot to be desired. And I think it's very important for the Aspen community to have for our passengers flying through the Aspen airport to have a good experience. And here in Aspen, unfortunately, during most of our peak months, it's a negative experience both on arrival into Aspen, whether it's waiting for bags shoulder to shoulder, or on your departure back out to Aspen with longer ticket lines, longer TSA lines, or closure of this current sterile boarding area because we've hit fire capacity in there. Travel is already quite frazzling, and we as the airlines like to do our best to make travel as comfortable as possible. And it's very difficult for us to do that when you're shoulder to shoulder in a boarding area, when it's difficult to hear the PA system, things like that. In the current facility is definitely very difficult to provide that to our passengers. And so that's definitely something that we would like to see addressed as we move forward. This airport has just kind of lived its life. It's done very well, but for the current level of service that we provide, all 3 carriers provide to Aspen, it's been overgrown. So that's kind of my outlook on the current terminal.
Very briefly, am I still going out? Yeah, okay. Very briefly, I would just say that I think there are improvements that can be made at this airport that don't necessarily mean tons of more airplanes are going to be coming in. There's just some tweaks and enhancements that can maybe just help with the current situation, even if it's just an IROP day where every airport has late flights coming in, and we can schedule to the perfect day, but every day is not perfect. So there's ways, and just the fact that you guys are getting together and meeting and looking at these alternatives, I think is great, because you can find enhancements to this airport without necessarily detracting from some of the other concerns you have.
I'd just like to add a shout out. For those of you that don't know, your county employees, your county staff, and the airport staff are doing a phenomenal job maintaining a facility. They're at times holding some of the infrastructure together with rubber bands and bubble gum and Band-Aids, and we really appreciate that. I want to say a shout out to John and his staff and the county executive for his support. They're doing a good job for you as a community. I just want everyone to know that, and we really, really appreciate that.
Second.
Having said that, I will tell you that just about every piece, as Danny was alluding to, of the customer experience is not what we would hope to see. When you enter the terminal building and you enter the lobby, and we have the security checkpoint line backed up out to the doors, it makes it very difficult for customers to get to the ticket counter. And Aspen is unique in the fact that almost every one of our customers has to see us at the ticket counter because of the types of bags that they are checking. Now, a lot of cities, people use the kiosks and they're on their way. In Aspen, we have a lot of checked bags, and getting those customers with their checked bags through the crowd that backs up from the security lines is quite a challenge. So we need a right-sized lobby, and we need a right-sized security checkpoint. And for those of you that don't have TSA pre-check, you should get it because it really helps. And we should help expand the checkpoint so that there's a true, real ability to use pre-check as design and the other side of it. And I still think they're doing a good job here. Those are some of the things. When you get into the fact that the building is not capable, you're not capable of going from one section of the building to the other section of the building without going outside. So if you're picking up your checked bags and for some reason you need to go back to the ticket counter, it's a bit of a challenge to do that because you've got to go outside and go around to get back into the building. And those are things that we would really like to see changed or enhanced in whatever decision the community makes regarding a facility.
We really wish Lauren would come out of his shell a little bit and be able to share a little bit more.
As you
with
can tell, I don't talk nearly enough.
Okay, Ms., you're up, man. It's your chance to answer that question.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry I'm late. You're serious?
All right.
How's it going?
Ms., tell us who you are and why you're late.
Well, I'll start by thanking everyone for being here and for having this visioning session. My name is Mizraim Cordero. I serve as Director of State and Local Government Affairs for United Airlines, based out of Denver, but covering the Mountain West. And I'm late because our flight had a little mechanical issue, and I'm thrilled that safety is our primary focus, and so we went back to DIA and found another aircraft, and then got here as soon as we could.
Right.
I didn't.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to the question we're talking about right now is does the Aspen Terminal meet your airlines and passenger needs? And basically the answer was no. Is there anything that's working well, and is there any kind of a priority? Oh yeah, SkyWest has to go too.
SkyWest has
But
a
I
page and
also
a half
wanted
here.
to know too, if you guys have any kind of a priority list as to the biggest challenges and how you'd like to see them addressed. But go ahead, Mike, and read
So
what SkyWest
I'll do
has
the
to say.
summary, and then there's a lot of detail on the challenges. We routinely hear negative feedback from passengers regarding their experience while traveling through the Aspen Terminal, particularly during peak travel seasons. Many of these concerns would be addressed by updating and improving the current terminal. And then when we get into the details, I've got lots of them.
So I think first and foremost for everyone is always safety. We have the safety of our passengers and the safety of our employees as well to worry about. We put that in front of everything. We want each of our passengers to arrive in their final destination just like they left their original destination. So I think some of those improvements are both on the ramp side and inside the terminal. That followed very closely by the current hold room of the airport, the sterile boarding area. Once you pass through security before you board your aircraft, it's currently capped at about 395 people. So with 65 to 70 seat jets, it's a pretty low number to fit inside that room. Once we hit that number, the airport has no other option than to close the checkpoint for fire capacity reasons. So that's definitely our biggest driving problem. If we have any delays, any cancellations, any issues at all that delay a regularly scheduled day, it immediately causes a cascade effect back into the ticketing area, as Lauren mentioned previously. This can happen from a simple snowstorm in Chicago. Weather here, it's very easy for a flight time to shift slightly, and for the inability for the rest of the airport to continue to operate due to 1 or 2 flight delays, it makes it very difficult to work through our day as an airline. It makes it very difficult for us to serve you all and get you all where you need to go just because a flight is delayed or 2 flights are delayed. So I would definitely say that's kind of our biggest ask when we're looking into the future is sizing the airport according to the schedule that the community wants. So, maintaining the current level of service, we've overrun the capacity of the terminal already. And so, we're talking about growth and you're talking about staying the same size. To maintain what we currently have, we do need the growth of the terminal just for us to continue to do what we currently provide for the community. The second kind of part of it ties back in with safety is definitely the ramp side of the airport. You currently have quite a grade coming from the taxiway down to the terminal. That makes it difficult to move aircraft around out on the ramp as well as boarding. When we're ground boarding aircraft, you're ground boarding off of an inclined ramp. The airport does a fantastic job at snow removal, but sometimes Mother Nature can hit a little harder than anybody can remove snow. Many times we've started boarding a flight and the pavement's dry. By the time you're done boarding the flight, you can have a 1/4 half inch of snow out there. And so that just ties back into that safety of, we want to ensure all of our passengers are in the same exact condition as when they started their journey as when they end. And with ground boarding on an uneven terrain, it's a very daunting task for the airport as well as the air carriers to keep that boarding path clear as passengers are boarding our aircraft or deplaning our aircrafts.
You got anything, Liz? You got to make up for time now. It's all going to you, buddy.
I don't think I have much on that one.
Go
So
ahead, Mike.
SkyWest has a pretty long list of biggest challenges they'd like to see addressed. Space, boarding flow, boarding and deplaning. Passengers are often required to travel a long distance from the terminal to their aircraft. This includes crossing areas where equipment also needs to travel. The ramp is sloped with a 3 to 8% grade differential, which is especially challenging in snowy and icy conditions. Equipment often requires extra securing to prevent sliding or rolling. Relative to airport and passenger security, a high-profile and VIP passenger or high-security facility is inadequate, and the close proximity of aircraft on the ramp creates confusion for passengers who may unintentionally board the wrong aircraft. Relative to gate hold and security line, disabled customers must navigate the security line on a slope, and passengers can be delayed going through security during peak travel periods because of the limited space in the gate holding area, the thing that you had mentioned. Ticket counter departures is inadequate space and the queue lines intersect. You mentioned that. Baggage claim, it's inadequate space in terms of overall size. Terminal flow, arrivals and departures are not connected inside, so passengers must access from the outside. Again, you mentioned that. Behind the house, operational facilities for staging, baggage makeup, the space is constrained, requires moving equipment multiple times, and there's limited storage for ground equipment. It is challenging to ensure adequate power supply for that equipment. We heard a little bit on that. There is limited covered areas that can be used during storms or severe weather. Storage of supplies is insufficient, and for employee facilities, inadequate space for a number of employees, break rooms, locker room, training areas, meeting rooms, facilities, and not good access to water, sinks, and drains.
So, and just one thing to add, of course. So when you guys get through with this, I want to just be emphatic that we fully support what the community is doing here and understand that you want to see an airport that meets the needs and desires of the Pitkin County community. Having said that, I would ask that as you wrap this process up towards the end of the year and make some decisions on the character and the flavor of the airport that you want, that you allow the carriers to offer additional feedback, not to override with things that you're trying to achieve, but to help collaborate to find a way to make what we need to provide a good experience for you mesh with the items you've determined are important to you, and make those two things work together in harmony. So I would ask that the county and the airport and the air engineers and architects do keep us involved as this program progresses, and I'll stop at that.
Well, I'll add this. I agree with what you said 100%. I think for us, at United, our partnership with SkyWest, our partnership with the county and the airport is critical, and we can help the community achieve its vision, both for the airport in terms of economic development is a win-win for all of us. Since I wasn't here for the very beginning, I'll also add that I've looked at the questions that were submitted, and you'll see that I may not have perhaps the answer that you want. A lot of the questions, or some of the questions that were submitted, had to do with topics that could get some of us in jail if we tried to answer them in this forum. So I have no desire of getting there. And so I may give some extra diplomatic answers so I don't run into a foul. But I'm here because we value the partnership, and like you said, it is important that the community reaches a vision for what they want to see, and that we partner together to help it get to that vision. And so let's keep it going.
One last thing I would like to add is don't forget the air side. The land side deserves a lot of conversation, but the FAA has identified that the airport surface now is a very critical element to the structure of the national airspace system. We used to just think about the airplane when it was in the air and how that affected the flow of aircraft, delays, et cetera. The FAA is putting a lot more emphasis now on the surface, meaning taxiways, runways, et cetera, beyond just the terminal building. So you may want to look at what potential improvements are there as well too for the experience. I'd hate to have a plane divert to Grand Junction because there's no place for that airplane once it lands on the runway to go anywhere. Sorry, we're out of space. So the plane diverts to Grand Junction for that reason alone is not the optimum solution.
Can I ask a question of the group? Is there anyone here, by a show of hands, that wants to do the airport tour with John Kenny that has not had a chance to yet, and that wants to see a little bit of this, the constraints of space that we have? Anybody? All right, we got just a couple hands going up. I don't know, over there. I suggest that the 3 or 4 of you that raised your hands, yeah, talk to Melissa afterwards, and we'll make that happen. Okay, if the terminal at the Aspen Airport remains as is, does this affect the level or nature of service, how your airline will provide, I assume, service to the Aspen Airport?
So as I already kind of spoke to, both the airport, the county, as well as the ground handlers here in Aspen, we're all working as tightly together as we can to hold on to the current level of service. It is certainly on peak days a very difficult experience for both customers and employees alike. So if the terminal were to remain with its current constraints, it would be a large task for any major carrier to maintain its current level of service, I believe. The terminal is currently at capacity, I would say.
It is likely, though, that right now, if you figure we're trying to squeeze a gallon into 3 quarts of capacity, that situation would continue. And I don't say that specific to American. I say that over everybody. In other words, we're just like any other business. There is supply and there's demand. We're going to try to meet the demand that is here and do it in the best way that we can with what we have to work with. So we hope that that's taken into consideration, and there's a recognition that even for today's level of service, the current facility does need to be improved.
From SkyWest, if no changes are made to the terminal, we will continue to work to provide our customers with safe, reliable service. However, making updates to the terminal would provide a number of benefits that many of our passengers have asked for and would provide a more comfortable, efficient experience.
Specifically, what would be your ideal terminal size in the limited amount of space that we have? I assume that means the footprint of, what we have at the airport. What's possible?
SkyWest says
and
the
that's
ideal
the
terminal
other-
size would allow for more efficient operations and would better accommodate the increased level of passengers that is typical during peak travel periods.
And all I'd say is that we would need to get into that with the architects and the engineers, because a lot of that depends on what the community decides they want to see in the airport, and again we get back to the tone or the texture or flavor of the terminal that you wish to have. And so some of those decisions are going to drive the necessity for what kind and type and amount of space that is required to make that work. So I can address one of the things. You want to stay low to the ground. So if you want a single level terminal, that terminal is going to have to be spread out more than, say, a multi-story terminal. Certainly something that we can work with, but just understand what the final decisions of the visioning process drive is how we react to that question. And that's what we would work with, again, as I requested earlier, when it comes to the engineers and the architects. We can help answer that question more effectively once this process has concluded.
So now on to market considerations. It has been suggested by the community that the airport route is among the most profitable in your system, and therefore costs passed on by the county to the airlines for airport improvements will not be a significant concern. Can you comment on the accuracy of this from your airline's standpoint?
Given the fact that I have a competitor in the room, given antitrust concerns, I cannot answer that question.
Airline economics are like an entire college curriculum, and there's like a team of hundreds probably at headquarters that do that. So way beyond our ability to answer. Yeah.
So what do you wish people knew about the Aspen Airport? What should we as a community be thinking about?
The customer experience. Bottom line, what are they going to get as they come through this airport, and are they going to enjoy it from the second they get on the property, get on the airplane, and get to their destination and return? The customer experience is so important.
Right. So do you want to look forward as a community? Do you want to look out the windshield? And do you want to drive towards better environmental stewardship, better use of technology, quieter and more efficient airplanes, as Paul said, an overall better customer experience? Those are the things you're looking at as you work through this visioning process and the steps we need to take to get there. Or do we want to look, well, out the side window or in the rear view mirror and see where we've been and where we are today and leave it at that? Because if you think what you have today is acceptable, then that would be one option. But I would suggest to you that as your partner, we hope that you would want to look forward into these other opportunities that are out there. And again, my understanding of the Pitkin County community is that you are very engaged. You are very interested in environmental stewardship and technology and all of these different things that are out there and are available if we modernize and update your existing the facility. So I'm not talking about a new airfield or new airport. I mean, taking what we have to work with and expanding upon that to create what is necessary to meet the needs of the travelers both today and down the road in the next decade or two.
From an airline perspective, we have 2 windshields and we have no rear view mirror. So we need to go forward together.
If I may, when I saw that question, I thought, well, they're going to get a bunch of answers that are quite industry, narrow. I think you said it best. For sure, we'd like to promote to our customers outside of here that you have an excellent airport with a really good experience for folks as they're transitioning in and out of the community. But I thought that I'd love to hear someday what you all think about. What is it that you want us to put out there about your community? What is it you want to be said about your community by us who promote your community in other places?
I think you're going to get that when we open it up to questions. So let me just get through these last few, and then we'll open it up to the questions. And these are a little bit repetitive, but what trends excite you about the airline industry now? Where do you see the biggest opportunities into the future for air service at the Aspen Airport?
I think the most exciting thing for me is the connectivity. I mean, more people can now get from and to Aspen to more destinations than ever before. Just speaking for my airline, we launched within the network, we launched a bunch of new transatlantic service last week. So you can now fly on American from Aspen to Tel Aviv. You couldn't do that before. That's the connectivity that people from here, you don't have to drive to Denver and take another carrier per se. You can fly right out of here and get to some of those really cool destinations as well. That's what's exciting for me. Our mission is to make the world a smaller place, and I think today's technology is helping us do just that.
Anybody else want to jump in on that? Okay, in places like Telluride and Jackson Hole, have you seen large increases in enplanements with airport expansion?
I would say large is probably not the correct word. Maybe some expansion, but not large. But again, I don't go to Jackson Hole on a regular basis, and I haven't seen I've actually flown in there before when I was in the military, but from what my limited experience, I would say not large, but some improvement. But again, it goes back to maybe the customer experience is better, so that they would rather fly right into Jackson Hole instead of maybe only flying to Salt Lake City and then driving up because, I don't want to mess with that airport. I'd rather just fly into Salt Lake City and rent a car. I may have to rent a car anyway. Why not rent it in Salt Lake City? So I think that's where you're seeing the difference, is not that you're going to have, you could build 20 more gates here. Not that I'm saying you want to, but you could build 20 more gates, but there's only 16 to 17 airplanes an hour that can land here based on how air traffic runs the airspace here. That's the maximum in good weather. 16 to 17 an hour arrivals, and you can basically about the same number of departures. So, at some point there's a limit to just how far you're going to be able to expand.
How do you see yourselves working with the community to meet our needs and values?
Well, here we are. We're here, and we'll come back if you need us to. We want, as we said, we want to be your partner in this. We want to help you with what it is you need and want to accomplish. We strive to be good community partners wherever we fly, and Aspen is no exception. So to that end, we're available, and we will do what we can to help. And when we reach the end of this process, as I said, we've just offered our services in terms of how to implement the vision you have or the vision you arrive at to make it also work well. So that's what we'd like you to know. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, I think one of our biggest things today was certainly just getting the information you all need to you from our perspective. It's your airport to kind of to mold. We're just here trying to give you the facts of what we do every day and how it impacts you all as a community and the passengers that fly through the airport. Just bringing you what we see so that way you all can better shape your future airport.
All right, let's open it up for questions. Does anyone have a question? Start over here. Do we have a mic?
We're going to need to steal.
Because I don't have any prepared SkyWest. Again.
Go ahead and say your name and what committee you're on.
That sounds a little better. So I think we're going to have to build a new terminal if we do something. Question is, do we keep the existing runway and a 90-foot wingspan limitation? And I would like to know specifically what the airlines, it was asked, but you didn't really answer it. What aircraft would you bring in here if we stay with a 95-foot wingspan? And what kind of an operation could you operate here? Number two, if we build a new runway, which would allow a full Class 3 operation with the limitations of our mountains and our altitude, our concern is how can we prevent from being overwhelmed with big aircraft coming direct from New York or Miami and with no limitation, overwhelming our community, more flights because you can get here with bigger planes, and more noise because of that, more pollution. So the two scenarios are, if we kept the 95-foot wingspan limitation with the existing runway, or a new runway where you could bring in bigger planes, how can we limit the growth that if we want to? So I'd like to know from both sides.
So you've got two things going on. One thing to keep in mind is that we cannot answer in the exact specifics because we have the whole antitrust thing and kind of what Ms. said. I like to live with the delusion I'm much too pretty for prison. So having said that, the 95-foot wingspan is a challenge because eventually you're going to run out of an airplane. That's if you look at what's being manufactured today and what's in the fleets today, you're going to eventually run out of an airplane. So I can say that, and I think I'm comfortable saying that. In terms of the other concern about not wanting, A380s with 500 people landing, the size of the community and the demand is self-limiting.
And I think you also need to recognize that even if you were to get a larger aircraft, you would probably end up with fewer flights. And again, I'm speaking theoretically. I know nothing specific for any carrier, including American. That's not at my bailiwick. But you're not likely to exceed the number of seats for which there is demand out of this community. And it is a self-limiting thing in the natural. One of the great things about our country is we run on the capitalist system, and we actually, you know, free enterprise. We're not going to be able to bring in more people than want to fly here, and it does self-limit itself based on the capacity of the terminal that is built and the runway. I just think that at the end of the day, the 95-foot wingspan is going to create. If you do not relax that standard, get that standard relaxed, it's not going to be an issue of having too many flights. It's going to be an issue of having too few.
And just using other airports as examples, if you want to limit the number and the size of the aircraft, just don't build too many gates either. You could have 5 runways out here, but if you only have 2 gates, it's kind of. I mean, I'm being a little bit obvious, you know.
Has that been an effective strategy in other locations?
Absolutely, absolutely. Seattle's a perfect example of that. See, and again, I told you, there's only so many airplanes that the air traffic control will allow to come in here in an hour because of the nature of the valley and how it's one in and one out. That's gonna stop it right there. Okay. I mean, to the point of everybody else is holding, and at some point, it's just not worth it to have 30 airplanes out there holding.
Right. Thank you.
My name is Valerie Braun, and you didn't answer about how much longer you think your CRJ700s will remain active. I hope you do. But my real question is, the problem for us, many of us, with this airport is if we go to a wider wingspan, it allows bigger GA to come in. And evidently, there's no way to control that. If a commercial aircraft wider than 95 can land here, then anything in GA that size can land here. And to speak to the number of operations, I can tell you that there are days where there are more than 32 operations an hour at this airport, in and out.
That was quoted to me by the Denver Air Traffic Manager.
I understand that. But I can tell you that it does happen on busy days that there are more, and it scares the crap out of anybody who lives underneath the airport. But anyway, the point of what I'm trying to say here is that, you know, we'd like you to be happy, we'd like to be happy, but we can't be happy if we have bigger and bigger GAs coming in here because they're overrunning the airspace now. The vast majority of operations is GA, not you guys.
So one thing, just from being at the airport on a regular basis, it comes back to, like he spoke about gate space. The GA side is also constrained on ramp space. I don't work on that side, but I can look down there quite easily. And at a certain point, they just can't park more airplanes down there.
They bring their people in, they leave. They come back empty and pick up their people. And that is what is happening at that airport.
So unfortunately, I can't speak to that because I don't work on that side of the field. But you know, in my opinion, it comes back to space constraints. You know, if you can't park the aircraft, if you can't taxi the aircraft can't come.
Does the FBO run a reservation program here? I'm asking. So they'll accept anybody who wants to come in here, no matter what time of day. That's. Well, yeah, I understand we have the curfew, but I mean, if 30 airplanes want to come in here and land all at 10 o'clock in the morning, the FBO's not going to say, sorry, I don't have room for all of them, because that's what a lot of FBOs do at a lot of other airports. That's right. And that's what I've been talking about, right. And that 16 to 18 that the Denver Center quoted me is in good weather. Visual conditions. Well, okay. Well, are you talking arrivals or the throughput? Right. Right. Okay.
Any more? Okay, right over there.
Hi, I'm Bob Circus. Thanks for coming. I understand that aircraft fuel is being trucked in from Denver, and I'm wondering, and that there are times when weather and other issues make those fuel deliveries difficult, and I'm wondering how this affects or constrains your flight operations during the year. And the second part of that is if fuel could be brought in only from Glenwood Springs to here, how would that improve or change your flight operations?
So Atlantic Aviation would be the FBO operator here. I know at certain times of the year there is certainly a high demand for fuel at this airport. I've been here in Aspen for almost 4 years now. We've never had it impact our operation. So I don't know where they truck it from, but I do know that they have a handle on it, and we have never had a commercial operation impacted by a lack of fuel.
And there's other options too. Have you heard of tankering? Operators can bring in more than what they actually need to arrive, and then that fuel's still sitting in the tank, so they don't need to uplift as much on the way back out. So there's other options that operators, not just scheduled carriers, but GA, any pilot can do to minimize the impacts of that.
Sheldon?
Hi, my name's Sheldon Fingerman. Hi. I was wondering, I've been here 50 years, and many, many, many moons ago, you used to be able to go to the airport and fly standby. Some of the airlines had coupon books, and I was wondering if there's any possibility any of that stuff could come back.
Sheldon, that's all in our rearview mirror that we don't have. Actually, the industry is the prices adjusted for inflation have gone down to the point that more people are flying now than ever before. So the days where you had an open middle seat where I didn't have to arm wrestle Paul the whole way, those days are thankfully behind us. I mean, from an industry standpoint, this is a good thing. We have full flights. And so the coupons and the standby, yeah, that's yesterday's news.
I used to sell those coupons, by the way, as a ticket agent a long time ago, and I can tell you most of our tickets are less expensive than the coupons were in a lot of cases. So,
Bill?
Hi, I'm Bill Dinsmore. I have a question about training your pilots. The level of extra training that a pilot needs to experience to fly in here, what other airports do you require your pilots to have that same level or a lower level of training?
Tegucigalpa is one for American Airlines.
No,
but
no, no.
that's
I
mainline.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, regional? Yeah, Durango maybe, or no, not Durango. For regional pilots. Yeah, for regional it's a little bit more unusual because they don't go to as many different mountainous cities that the main lines would. But most of that is regulated by the FAA, by the flight standards, by the certificate management office as to the extra level of training that's required based on that particular airport and the challenges they face. So we have what we call our op specs, and those op specs are approved by our FAA certificate management office that would say that if your pilots are going to fly into this airport, this is the minimum kind of training that they would have to do to be qualified to fly into that airport. So it's mostly regulated by the FAA on that.
I guess my point of my question is, a lot of us are under the impression that Aspen has a very challenging operating environment, i.e. it's a dangerous airport. FAA does not quantify airports as dangerous or not dangerous.
Right.
The indicator of difficulty or danger flying in here is the level of training that's required of a pilot to fly in here. Is the training here higher and more stringent than it would be at Wichita?
Yeah, well, for Wichita, absolutely.
No, well,
Yeah.
I mean, Grand Junction or Eagle Vale or the other ski resorts.
Yeah, it is a little bit more challenging. It is a little bit, the training would probably be more so than a lot of those airports you mentioned. There's a couple that don't have commercial service that I think are as challenging. Sun Valley is one, but that's GA only. So I can't really, I don't think, United, you don't fly into Sun Valley, do you?
I don't know.
Yeah. Do they, okay, so Sun Valley is another one that I'm aware of in Idaho. It's a one in, one out, mountainous surrounding the whole airport. There's a couple in Wenatchee, and I think in Washington, Horizon, which is a subsidiary, a wholly owned subsidiary of Alaska Airlines. They have unique qualifications. There may be a couple others, but there's not as many of them for the regional carriers compared to mainline.
And one thing that's important to note, and I understand the point you were making about if it requires additional training, maybe it is less safe. I want to say that it is not unsafe to fly into Aspen. That is right. That is the point of the additional training. So at all times, this is a safe airport to operate out of. If it were not, I'd be leaving right now to head back to Dallas to tell people to stop. We aren't going to fly here if we're endangering anybody.
But I didn't think it was safe. I wouldn't have come in on that flight today.
The level of training for you guys is really not an issue, other than the fact that we know you have to have a higher level. It's the rest of the world that flies in here who doesn't have that training, that scares the hell out of us.
I'm not so sure that if they want to fly in here, that they don't have to have that training as well. From a Part 121, if we're carrying passengers, Part 135, you're carrying passengers for revenue, there are very stringent requirements when you're carrying passengers. Now, if you're just Part 91 and you're not carrying passengers for hire, the standards are relaxed. But if you're carrying passengers, whether it be Part 135 or Part 121, the FAA requires much more stringent standards as to the qualifications of the crew and what you have to do. It's very regulated. I can assure you that. I was in flight training for a long time.
So it seems like this question is really, I mean, we've as a committee kind of talked a lot about the commercial side versus the GA side. So we're putting together the questions that really need to go to somebody at the FBO or at the GA side. And I believe somebody in the room is from the FBO, but I'm not going to put them on the spot to see if they want to answer any of these questions unless they, of course, decide they want to come up here and be a part of this conversation. So, John McBride, there was a question right there.
I'm John McBride, and thank you all for coming up and informing us. And I think you know that there are a lot of concerned citizens up here about the airport. Not so much about the length of the wingspan and safety on the ground. I think the big concern of this group of people is safety in the air. As you know, we have an unusual airport, narrow valley, high altitude. And I think it would be very helpful if there's any way that you as a group could direct us to how we could get performance specifics for different aircraft. Certain aircraft can get out of here a lot easier when fully loaded, let's say with a 10-knot wind from the west and 70 degrees than others. And we've never been able to get that from the FAA or anyone else. I'm sure you as a group could get that information. I think it would be very valuable for the citizens to know, because certain aircraft are certainly safer than others, considering they have to make a 180 turn back out of the valley.
Right.
Yeah.
But John, I'm going to tell you, I can go to any ops engineering, and we're going to need a standard. Because like I said, the performance of the airplane is a very tactical type of thing. It changes from day to day. How much fuel do I need to take out today compared to the day before? It may depend on what is going on at the destination airport. I've got, like I said, I got thunderstorms. I've got to carry an extra 10,000 pounds of fuel. I'm just throwing a number out there. That's going to affect your performance. You're not going to climb as fast, or you have to take weight off somewhere else to compensate for that. The temperature is going to have something to do with that. Is the runway wet? Is there snow on the runway? That affects the performance. I mean, there's a lot of criteria. It's beyond the mountains. Obviously, is what we have to clear, but what other factors allow that airplane to clear the mountains? Now, certainly, some airplanes on a standard day are going to perform better than others. So we have to. Do you want just a standard day, dry runway, 70 degrees? 5-knot headwind, and then just use every airplane based on that criteria? That might give you a comparison, but that's not necessarily what you're going to see every day for every airplane type.
I understand there are all kinds of variables, but clearly certain aircraft, if at max weight and coming in at higher landing speed and what have you are going to require a wider radius, which is going to be more difficult in this valley than others. And I think we've never really been able to get answers to that if it was all the same conditions for all the different aircraft.
Well, there's a lot of aircraft out there that we'd have to get that for. I can give you some that I don't want to commit. I don't want to say, oh, okay, this airplane is the ideal airplane for Aspen. I just know this, like an Airbus A319 is a very good performing airplane. It's got the same length of wing as an A320 and a 321, but because it's lighter, it's got basically the same engines, and it's got that bigger wing, that thing's like a little hot rod. Whereas a 321 is a dog. But American Airlines would never fly a 321 in here because of that. We understand that.
Real quick, and I'm sorry if I missed this.
Hang on one sec. Hang on. We need to fix your mic.
Okay. Did you hear the beginning, or do I need to start?
No. Go ahead
So,
and introduce
real
yourself.
quickly, was Delta invited and they declined, or were they not able to come? I'm just curious because they're a pretty important carrier in and out. I just was wondering why they weren't here.
Yes, they were invited, and they declined.
Okay. That being said, we were talking about airport experience and being on the airport experience working group. Is there anything that you guys gather from your multitude of surveys that you do with your guests of an amenity or a service or something that would set Aspen apart or create a great impact? For example, I happened to be on a random trip diverted to Milwaukee, and going through security there's a recombobulation station that I thought was brilliant. It's an opportunity for you to get your kids and to get your stuff together and to gather your thoughts. And maybe that's not it, but to me that kind of spoke of, wow, what a creative, unique idea. And if any of you ever had a kind of a light bulb moment or something overwhelming from your surveys that we could consider for our airport to make it unique and really provide that great sense of arrival and experience.
So one of the biggest things that we consistently see on feedback surveys is space, for sure. The ability to have you, your family, whoever you're traveling with you, not be shoulder to shoulder and be able to carry on a normal tone conversation seems to be very important to the traveling public. That is something that, on peak periods we are unable to provide in the current terminal. Some of the other kind of consistent feedback that we see is the kind of audio visual paging abilities, the boarding of flights, and the ability for passengers of that may be from different countries or may speak different languages. The ability for all of our passengers to both see and hear what's going on with flights across the board is very important. We consistently run into kind of issues when one carrier is boarding a Chicago flight on one side and another carrier is boarding a Chicago flight on the other side. It's a confusing experience for some passengers, and some passengers end up in wrong lines. So kind of conveying what the current situation may be, whether it's a delay, whether it be boarding, whatever that may be, ensuring that all the passengers are aware of that is very critical to our passengers as well. Another one that I hear a lot of is some sort of lounge area. We have a lot of very high-profile passengers fly through this market. Most of these passengers in our major hubs are treated with, first-class lounges, frequent flyer lounges, things of that nature. And that's a very common one that we, across the board, are asked of, where's your first-class lounge? What do you mean it's not a first-class lounge? Things of that nature.
All airports are first class.
One of the very difficult things with this market is we do see a lot of elite passengers. So, that's definitely something to take with a grain of salt of, if you make a first class lounge, is that bigger than the terminal size?
No, but that was the first thing that came to all of our minds right away, is some kind of club or a little bit of a premium experience for those who want to just get out of who want to have that option of getting out of the masses, so to speak.
And then I think as a final thing that we just kind of see across the board is kind of eatery options, whether it be speed or availability of food or options of food, things like that. The Aspen traveling public has a very dynamic group of passengers, I would say. And so, your one-size-fits-all dining option is a little bit difficult for a lot of passengers. But those are kind of the 3 or 4 hot topics that I see a lot in surveys or face-to-face with our passengers.
Our first-class lounge is the FBO right down the way. Right. Okay, who else? Tom?
You already had a turn. I can have 2 turns. You're not limited to one thought in this room.
Tom Melberg.
Wait. It's not on.
Reservation. Paul, I thought you alluded to a possibility that the county might be able to institute a reservation system for GA traffic. And if that's
all I know is it's done at a lot of other airports.
so, it is a possibility.
Absolutely, but
And
that's up to the FBO. They may see that as limiting their revenue. I don't know. It's their business decision.
But in the event that we could, as a community, have a reservation system, wouldn't that help our commercial airlines
Absolutely.
traffic? Thank you.
Yeah, it doesn't do us any good if we're ready to go and we can't even get off the gate and get out to the runway because this airfield is overcrowded.
My name is Suzanne Caskey. We keep hearing the nice phrases about reduced noise and reduced pollution levels. Quantify that for us. I mean, is it 2 decibels less, 1,000 decibels less? Does it vary with the weather?
I don't have that information with me, but I can get it for you. I mean, real numbers, not just squishy stuff.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
we
real
can do that,
numbers.
definitely.
Technical teams that can provide that.
Okay.
That's a little bit beyond our ability.
Okay.
We know the gist of it.
Can I come back to you?
My name is Richard Heedy. Thanks for coming up. Last fall, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out with a risk assessment of what would happen if the world exceeds 1.5 degrees centigrade. And I'm just wondering if either of the airlines here has an assessment group where it models how it, as a company, over the next 30 to 40 years even, can aim for having a net zero airline with offsets, with fuel efficiency, with biodiesel, all kinds of other programs. You got one. Excellent.
I'm going to throw the book at you.
And there are a lot of passengers, as the concern about climate change rises, will tend to take an airline that can promise them better climate performance. Just wondering if that's a business opportunity for you guys.
If I may, I'll just take one crack at it. So airlines are being looked at to be better stewards, even though altogether in the U.S. and in the world, the amount of carbon that we put in the atmosphere is roughly 2%. But they are cognizant that public opinion is focused on them, and so the Airline Association, Airlines for America, is very involved, and so are all of our companies. And there are targets for reducing and cutting greenhouse gas emissions, and I'll tell you what those are. So the goals are to reduce by 1.5% annual average fuel, to increase 1.5% annual average fuel efficiency by 2020 or through 2020, to be carbon neutral growth from that point forward, and then to achieve 50% net reduction of CO2 by 2050 relative to 2005 levels. So that's industry-wide. From a United perspective, we're keen on that. I'm sure if you've flown United, you've seen our Eco Skies program. We focus on improving our fleet so that we have much more efficient airplanes. We only taxi with one engine on. We try to do ongoing descent so that we don't have to power up during descent. And we are also invested in finding ways to develop aviation sustainable fuels. That doesn't change the amount of carbon an engine is producing. The efficiency of the engine changes that. What it does is that if you're able to keep trash out of landfills, turn it into aviation fuel, then you're reducing the amount of greenhouse gases that landfill is putting over a long period of time. In addition, we're also, if you've flown us, you know that we recycle. We are working on decreasing energy usage in our largest facilities, which account for about 85% of our electric use. And I'll leave it at that. You hit on something that I'm excited about that we're working on constantly.
And that's industry-wide. It's not just United. I know Ms. is excited about this, but we at American are excited about this as well.
Super.
So, and even the other airlines, we're all making a conscious effort in that regard.
We're moving that direction. And I would prefer to have that airplane with 70 passengers land here instead of having to land in Grand Junction and then bus them up here and burn all that carbon coming in too. So, you know, there's advantages to the greenhouse gases by just avoiding those unnecessary diversions as well.
Do you still have a burning question?
I'm Bill again.
Hi, Bill.
You mentioned before about that you would be reluctant to have an aircraft, for example, that was a 100-seat aircraft. You'd have to tear out seats in order to operate here, 76 seats perhaps. Would you consider just not selling 24 seats and not reconfiguring the aircraft, but just reconfigure the ticket sales? So the same aircraft, you can use it in different environments, but you don't have to tear out the seats. So you could operate it. So an aircraft that had limitations on the number of seats here at 76, but it had 100 seats, you could operate in any other environment. So that gives more you were representing that you had less flexibility there because you had to tear out seats. It doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, I was also wondering about the wing size too. I mean, we can tear out, or we can fly in a 757 here if you made the runway big enough, and then maybe block half the seats. But now you got a bigger airplane in there. I was trying to think of also reducing the size of the airplane to meet your 95. That was part of what you know, we're running out of those kind of options. But you're absolutely right. We do that now. We block at the point where we don't necessarily offer to sell every single seat coming out of here for the performance reasons of getting out of this airport. We don't like leaving passengers behind if we can avoid it.
Yes, so to speak a little further on that, some of you may have been on flights before that are weight restricted in or out of Aspen. So something that we've done internally is figured out exactly how many passengers these airplanes can hold at what times of day we are expecting to fly these aircraft. So we know if it's hotter at 4 o'clock, we can't carry as much payload as if we're leaving earlier in the morning, things like that. So we currently go in and restrict our selling numbers so that way we can ensure that we provide the best customer experience possible. We don't have to take delays to find volunteers or take people off aircrafts. You know, we do that to provide the best customer experience that we can here in Aspen. You know, I think what he was talking about previously is if these CRJ7 or when these CRJ700s are no longer flying, we would have to find another aircraft that meets that wingspan restriction to still operate here in Aspen. And so that's, you know, is it available to block seats? Absolutely. We do it now today to ensure customer experience, but we just need an aircraft that can still fly into Aspen to make sure that we can still provide that service.
And an important point, the bigger the wing, the better performing that airplane's going to be. You're going to get more lift.
Just to defend Paul, I think that when it kind of got conflated because we really did pull seats out of airplanes to fly out of Love Field. So I think those two ideas may have gotten intertwined because we actually have in the past had to pull out aircraft seats. So.
And maybe it is, and that's what we were talking about early on, is that there are new airplanes coming out all the time that are more fuel efficient, that are quieter. They don't have these components that when they put the flaps and the slats out, you hear the additional whine and the sounds that are, and the gear down, those all add noise. The manufacturers are very acutely aware of those kind of issues, and they know that's what the carriers are looking for, not just commercial and scheduled carriers, but also the GA. Or I guarantee your GA owners want your Learjets, your G5s. They don't want to spend any more money on fuel. They want more efficient airplanes just as much as the regular operators.
You guys are the ones operating them right now. Isn't the 550, isn't it simply a converted and recertified 700, which is no longer in service? Or not, I mean, no longer being manufactured? Yeah, so it's still not a manufacturer. You're not manufacturing new ones, right? This is conversions.
They're retrofitted.
That's way above my pay grade.
Yeah.
But thanks for the question.
Right.
Yeah, no clue.
Bill?
Yep, I have a question. Bill Tomsich here. As we discussed earlier, I've been watching the airlines very closely, particularly American, since he started flying here in 2011. There have been some really tough questions answered here, or asked of you guys, and I thought you've offered some great answers based on your relative areas of expertise. But there's one question that I've heard 3 times that hasn't yet been answered. I'm going to try to make this a little easier for you because, Danny, you just touched on it because this is where I was going with this, is when do you expect the CRJ700s to be removed from service? And my guess is, at this point in time, that has not yet been determined, and therefore there's no clear answer to it. So my second part of this question is, do you expect those aircraft to be flying forever?
So from all 3 carriers here in Aspen, we don't operate the aircraft ourselves. We contract out SkyWest to operate the CRJ700s for all 3 airlines here in Aspen. So we don't have the scope of how long those aircraft are going to be flying here. So, I don't have an exact retirement date. Envoy used to fly here with the CRJ700s under the American flag. We have since transferred those aircrafts over to PSA, so they're still in the American system, but they're flown by a different carrier. And that's when we transitioned all of our flying over to the SkyWest side because Envoy no longer owns those or operates those aircrafts.
To the second part of your question, every aircraft that has ever been built has eventually retired or will eventually retire. The CRJ700s will eventually retire.
Yeah, the manufacturers will come up with something better that's a suitable replacement. They'll figure that demand out. Absolutely. That's you can look back in history, and that's always been the case. Yes, sir.
Wait.
I just want to make one point, being fairly familiar with the CRJ. Would it be fair to say that on an annual basis, those aircraft in an airline environment fly 3,000 hours, plus or minus?
I don't think that we would have that data.
Well, my guess would be it's more than that.
Yeah. Okay, well, say 4,000. The life of the CRJ as it's currently configured is 60,000 hours. So it's got a lot of life left in it. Plus, you can re-engine it. They're looking at new winglets, as you say, more wing, and the winglet counts for wing size. So that's going to make a difference to not only the performance, but the age and the flexibility in an environment like here. So the aircraft is not retiring because of the aircraft. The aircraft is retiring because the airlines, which you've all acknowledged today, have another aircraft that's coming in for other RJ routes that is more suitable, and you don't want to have one that's unique to this airport. So the aircraft is not the issue here. It's the operating, and rightly so. It's exactly what you're doing.
It's cost prohibitive at some
Sure.
point to operate that, then it makes no sense for us to do that.
Yeah, well, if you could re-engine the 700 or the 550, it's the same airplane, and with winglets and re-engines, you get different performance.
But you still have to do major overhaul checks on that airframe as the older it gets, and that comes very
No
costly,
doubt.
taking that airplane out of service. I've never known an airplane yet that makes money sitting on the ground.
No argument. No argument.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and at some point, it becomes cost prohibitive.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why I was asking about the number of hours that you spread the costs over and all that sort of thing. But there's set-asides, as you well know. The airlines do it, and GA do it too, on the operating costs of the airplane to accommodate those. So you don't come to that point and then you say, well, how the hell am I going to pay for this? But in any case, that's right.
As we also spoke to a little bit earlier, you know, a lot of carriers are moving towards more fuel efficient, more quieter, more passenger friendly aircrafts. And so when you look at, you know, aircrafts retiring, it's typically replaced with something that's quieter, more fuel efficient, and the customer likes more. So, you know, when you look at any carrier over time, you know, you see us replacing aircrafts with exactly what the customer desires.
We probably don't want to retrofit all the CRJs with the Wi-Fi and the power outlets. Instead, we'd maybe like to provide a better airplane with a better experience. And that, like I said, every generation of airplane is quieter, more fuel efficient, less greenhouse gases. So, you know, so there's a benefit there too.
Oh, yeah, no, those points are not arguable, they're facts. I agree with that. It's also on the... on those
Is there a question? I mean, because this discussion, I don't know, it's valuable, but, I mean, do we want to keep discussing this?
If I have something that I
Okay,
want to add.
go ahead, Miz.
Can you hear me? I don't know. I think, I don't know, the question might come up again because there's somebody else in the audience that feels like they didn't get the final answer. The definitive answer to the question as it's come up in all its iterations ultimately carries another antitrust issue because we can learn intel about each other that is anti-consumer. So that's why you're not going to get an answer. You're not going to get like the meaty answer, unfortunately.
And the truth is we don't know, but if we did, we still couldn't tell you, is essentially it.
Heidi, do you want to add anything to this?
Actually, that's way out of my realm. So
Okay.
I can speak to terminal and customer service operations. I mirror what Danny does at the airport. So flight ops, performance, aircraft longevity is not in my realm, unfortunately.
Okay, any more questions? Cindy?
Hi, thanks for being here, and thanks for saying you want to work with us. So how much can you work with us in terms of noise guarantees and air quality guarantees?
I'm going to start with noise guarantee. I think I've iterated a few of the things that can be done that would help reduce the overall noise footprint here at the airport. When it comes to flight operations, though, I do need to be very clear about something, that the airport can publish, and we would push down to our pilots all the information on noise reduction and departure control, all those things, so you can have a noise reduction program in place. And just to be perfectly clear, the final say will always rest with the pilot in command, the captain of the aircraft, and if it means waking somebody up versus risking the safety of the people on board the airplane, we're going to wake you up. I'm sorry. That's the facts. However, having said that, we do commit to you, to the extent possible, to follow through on those things. We will provide all that information to our pilots, our crews. SkyWest will make every effort to comply. And as we talk about a new terminal or a new airfield, that's where we can help with the different things I've talked about already today, going to the electric ground equipment, not running the APUs as often, providing covered boarding that also allows us to hang that equipment off of that boarding platform so that we don't run diesel engines out there. That does help with noise and it does help with environment. Now, in terms of the specifics, we'd have to develop those with the engineers and with the architects and with the county administration and the airport. And we are committed to cooperating. But cooperation means it has to work as well. And it has to work for you and it has to work for us in order for it to work. It's a symbiotic relationship. And we are committed to doing that. And I know you wanted a specific number. I can't give that to you because it's well beyond my technical capacity. But we are definitely, I was not misleading you earlier when I said we are committed to making this happen and to doing what we can to help the community achieve its goals.
When it comes to airspace and the design of the airspace and how it flies, that is purely the responsibility of the FAA, Air Traffic Control. Ultimately, they're the ones who are going to try to develop the procedures. Where they ask for the airline input is, can our airplanes fly those procedures? They don't want to design a procedure the planes can't fly. So we provide guidance on, yes, our airplanes can do that specific path over the earth, But ultimately, that responsibility for reduction of noise and reduction of greenhouse gases by shortening routes or whatever they want to do, it lies, and it's true. It's true every airport. It's not just Aspen. That responsibility lies with the FAA. They have to take that. Sure. As long as they design a procedure that our aircraft can fly, we'll fly it where they tell us to go. Absolutely.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I do, bro. I'm calling it home.
Wait, hang on for my, hopefully it'll work.
Go GR.
I'm Sarah Garten, and we've talked about that there are flying requirements for pilots coming in here, a certification. The only catastrophes we've had in our airport are with general aviation. Why don't they have to have a certification for flying in here?
If they're carrying passengers
You
for
said that.
hire,
Yeah.
they better have it. Otherwise, they're violating FAA regulations.
And then the insurance will never
and,
pay.
And GA is kind of a broad scope. You can have a charter airplane that would normally be flying as a scheduled carrier. Scheduled is Part 121, non-scheduled but still carrying passengers for hire is Part 135. You're carrying passengers, the FAA's level of scrutiny is much higher when you're carrying passengers for hire. If somebody just wants to fly in his own airplane and he or she is the only pilot on that plane, no, they are not held to the same standard.
And if you own the plane and it's all your relatives,
Well,
they still don't
I
need
would
to be
hope that
exempt.
pilot would still be, cognizant of that. And yes, there are certainly requirements that all pilots have to maintain just to have the license. But there's all kinds of additional scrutiny on operators who carry passengers for hire.
Why doesn't general aviation have to go through TSA?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. Yeah,
That's unfortunate. That's something beyond our scope.
Yeah.
Again, that's something that would have to go to the Department of Homeland
It's,
Security.
Yeah, that's not our
The
answer.
government regulators make those regulations, and we do our part to comply with them as
It's a
they
big
apply
hole
to
in
us.
security,
so.
I think.
Yes, sir.
Hi. I live in Woody Creek, so I get to see all the approaches.
Say your name.
Oh, Lanny Curtis. Okay, so I get to see, all the airlines come in, all the airplanes, and the different patterns they take. So, I've noticed that, this summer it's been a lot noisier than it has. I know that we used to have the Fly Quiet program where you'd fly out, the 360, which is the runway 33, and also do turn slight right to 360. So I also was told at one point that reducing throttle on takeoff from 100% to 90% reduces the noise significantly. So I just want to know if that's true, and also the rate of climb. Just those are factors. What are the considerations?
I'm going to use an example of Orange County, which has a very stringent noise criteria. Orange County, Santa Ana, John Wayne Airport. It used to be that we had to bring the nose up, reduce the throttles. Most pilots were not comfortable. They felt it was safe, but they weren't comfortable with that. And we found out after about 10 years that the newer airplanes we were flying, we didn't have to do that procedure, and we still kept the decibels below the requirements of those noise monitors. And now we can fly the plane normally like we do any other airport, and standardization is a key. If you ask a pilot to fly a different procedure, a different way to fly that airplane at every single airport they go to, in my opinion, that's not really safe. You want to try to standardize the cockpit procedures as much as possible. That's been proven to be a very safe way to operate the airplane. Obviously, mountains are something you just can't move, and we have to deal with those. But in Orange County, because the airplanes, all of a sudden the newer airplanes weren't violating the noise sensors anymore, they didn't have to do that maneuver. And so my guess is that to some extent, we're seeing the same thing here, where the newer airplanes, don't have to reduce the throttle so much. And because, again, it's not just the thrust that's being generated by the engines, but it's also all the other configurations on the airplanes. When you extend flaps and slats and you have landing gear down and you have doors open, that does add some noise to the airplane. And airplanes are more efficient in that regard, not just in the engines, but also in the design of all those other exterior surfaces. And so without knowing the specific airplane and the specific pilot and how they flew that airplane, I'm guessing that has a lot to do with it.
I'm Phil Holstein. A lot of airplane manufacturers, Mitsubishi is one, are going to produce airplanes with bypass engines that can land here today with our restriction. CRJ aircraft, I understood that United just bought 40 of them. That was announced. And Mitsubishi just bought Bombardier, which makes the CRJ. They're not going to they're going to want an airplane that they can sell until they bring out their new airplane, which is supposed to be quite spectacular. If there were airplanes that you could fly into this restricted airport that would have the new engines, that would have fuel efficiency and so forth, would that hamper your operation if you could not fly the larger, heavier airplanes in here?
I think the key is still that 95-foot.
So I'm looking right now. The wingspan is 95 feet 10 inches. It technically does not comply. Also, I saw some performance stuff on the MRJ, and I'm not sure if it made. I want to be careful with this. I don't recall for a fact if it was the MRJ, but I'm not sure the performance on departure was satisfactory to actually make it a reasonable aircraft to fly into here. I'd have to leave that to our performance and ops teams. But again, technically, it's 95 feet 10 inches, which would be a violation. And I can tell you, as someone who just had to pay a fine for a few minutes violation on a curfew, it can get technical here sometimes. So,
Sheldon?
Hi, Sheldon Fingerman again. I just want to make a comment. Anybody who's here who's involved in this and has a tag hanging around their neck, if you haven't taken the airport tour, it's an eye-opener. You'll see things that you don't see when you're normally flying as a passenger. You'll learn about what has to be done to make the runway wider. You'll learn what a lot of the restrictions are. And again, it's a real eye-opener. It's definitely worth your time to do that.
If I may add to what Sheldon just suggested, this is just kind of what I've heard from folks on our team, is that if you get an opportunity to do that during your peak times, you should do that. So you have a real sense, because today might not be the best day.
They gave us pictures of what it's like there in peak, and it'll blow your mind.
And if you do that, I would recommend you also fly one of the carriers that are here today, because that would just make the whole picture.
What are our options? Okay, right here.
Yeah, this question's for Lauren.
Say your name, please.
Evan Marks, sorry. Going back to the other gentleman before Sheldon, who asked about the Mitsubishi, just to re-ask his question, would you buy an aircraft, potentially the Mitsubishi, they're redesigning it, it's under...
I'm the wet blanket on that one.
Okay.
Again, antitrust concerns, and I know where you guys are going. These guys just don't want to answer it. It's not that, we just really don't want to get in trouble.
Okay. In the back? Yep.
Hi, my name is Andrew Light. Thank you guys very, very much for being here. All things being equal, if we don't widen the runway or release the width restriction, it's generally, and you have specialized pilots, ragtagged equipment, specialized equipment, it's generally associated with less reliability, less frequency. correct? So our service would probably not be as good as we have now as those planes decline. Is that
While we couldn't comment specifically, again, same issue. I think you can extrapolate a reasonable conclusion based on what you just said.
it's the antitrust issue again? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we just can't talk future schedules. It's just not allowed. But, yeah, if there's not an airplane that can come in here, you know, 1 plus 1.
Any different questions? John?
Thank you. Hi, John Kinney out at the airport. The group is really bouncing around trying to get a question from you, so let maybe ask it differently that it does not touch upon the antitrust issue. Do you operate any aircraft in today's fleet, your fleet, or that has been publicly announced that you are going to order in the future, who has a wingspan less than 95 feet? Other than the CRJ.
This is the man that would know.
Yeah, no, other than those CRJs. Now, there's some that we fly. Okay. CRJ7s that we fly. Or in the 200s. But
CRJ700.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you operate currently in your fleet today,
What's the
or that you
wingspan
have
on the
publicly
900?
announced that you're going to acquire that has a wingspan
It does?
less than 95 feet?
Okay, so other than the CRJs, no.
Does it?
Okay, I'm going to let each one of you guys, starting down at the end, just say some closing remarks.
So really appreciate everybody's input, listening to our concerns and what we have to bring to the table. Really excited to be a part of kind of the future of the Aspen Airport, whichever way you all may guide that. Again, you know, as Lauren said, we're happy to be as helpful as we can in the process. I'm locally here in Aspen. We have a full team across the country. You know, whatever we can do to help this process along, I definitely shadow what he said, along with taking an airport tour. Come see what we're working in every day. Come see what the passenger experience is like. You know, I think it's definitely an eye opener for some people who haven't seen it, or haven't seen it recently during peak periods, things like that. But I really appreciate what everyone's doing here, and I appreciate you guys all listening for us.
What he said. And I want to compliment you all on putting in the time to do this right. You know, it's much easier to sit back and complain and say, well, they're not doing it right, but you're the people who are actually going to make this happen with our help, because we want to be part of the solution here. So you get that commitment from United, from American, from SkyWest. We're here. We're ready to help. I can't speak for the other carriers.
In my job, I've been engaged with other airports that are dealing with some of the same issues, and some of them are different. But what I can say is that I think the community engagement here is special, and I think because of the fact that you guys are putting in this time and effort, you're going to get it right. And I can't say that about every other airport that I've looked at that's considering improvements to their airfield and to their terminals and their long-term, what they call it, the ALP. I'm not so sure that all those airports have put in the dedication and the effort to figure it out like you guys have. So I have a lot of confidence that the Aspen Airport will be a wonderful airport far into the future because of what you guys are doing here.
And as I said earlier, I can't reiterate enough. You've got a great team at the airport. They're doing a fantastic job with what they have to work for. Your county administration is supportive and helpful. And for all of you that are here and showed up tonight, thank you so much for the dedication you're showing to your community, to the dedication you're showing to air service for the Valley and for the county. It is a testament to you, and we are very grateful for all of the input that you have had and provided and continue to provide. We support this ongoing commitment and process and hope to help you reach conclusions that are satisfactory, not just satisfactory, but awesome for you as a community and for the future here in the Valley. We certainly appreciate everything that's going on, and we thank you for having us here tonight so very, very much.
Very well said, gentlemen. Thank you. I'll add that, yeah, may your success only be limited by the amount of interest and effort you're putting into this, which is significant. So, thanks.
So if you didn't get your question answered tonight, you can email us. Email
ASE, info@asevision.com. Is that right, Mavis? info@asevision.com.
And if you want to do an airport tour, I also
Come see me. Yep.
Come see Melissa and join me in thanking these guys for being here tonight. Thank you.
So first, before we go on into next steps, I just again want to thank our panelists from Envoy and SkyWest, American and United. Conspicuously absent was Delta. I will be considering that in my future travel plans. I invite you to do the same. I'd also like to thank Jacky, who facilitated for us tonight. Thank you very much. So next steps, we heard loud and clear after our last meeting where we did the continua that the individual working groups are ready, anxious. It's probably been too long to really sink into the specific areas that you're selected for. And so we spent some time talking about that. And at our last get-together, we had identified additional questions and continua that need to be answered and completed to inform the visioning process. John Bennett mentioned some of these coming up, like what is the commercial service range that we want to have out of our airport? What are the number of GA and commercial operations, the user experience that we're seeking, ground connectivity, architecture and design. But before we could really dive into these, we really need to give our working groups an opportunity to sink their teeth into the data a little bit and into the information so that all of that conversation can be informed. And we've reached the point now in our process where we need to divide up that work. So I'm going to spend a few minutes, like I said, I'm going to try and get you out of here early, describing what we have planned for the working groups going forward. So, technical working group. The key question for the technical working group is what workable options exist for the future of the airfield. That was a topic tonight. Within that, how could the existing or future fleet mix meet the air pollution reduction, limited employment growth, and noise abatement goals recently established by the ASE Vision? Suzanne, I think you were saying just a few minutes ago, where are the facts? Give us the information. We're going to be asking the technical committee to look at what is that potential fleet that could operate here under these various scenarios, and what are those impacts on those values, whether it be noise, the air quality, employments, that sort of thing. So it's coming, and we're going to ask our technical committee to do that. In light of those community goals, what does the future airfield look like in terms of safety and airport design? We've heard a lot about that. What are our options? We heard a lot tonight. What are our options when it comes to GA? It's clear to us on commercial, but what can we do that will inform what we should do going forward? What are the implications of the status quo versus airport design? Group 2 versus design group 3. Could any variation exist within these design groups, such as landing speeds, aircraft weights, etc., that might help us meet our community goals? We heard a little bit about that tonight in some of the answers. And then how could our airfield be as green and carbon neutral as possible? Just so you know, this print looks so much bigger on my screen when I was 6 inches away from it. But we're going to be asking the technical committee to go back and review those value statements, the continua that are done to date. We're going to be looking at 2019 aviation forecasts and fleet projections, digging into that information about aircraft that can operate here on the commercial side and then on the GA side, so that we can really evaluate those aircraft that do have the performance characteristics and can make some recommendations about what is it we want here what do we want to accommodate with these improvements? The experience group, the focus of the experience group is going to be that based on our values, our goal of limited employment growth, and our goal to reduce CO2 and other emissions, what would a warm, welcoming, and comfortable terminal look like? How does that best fit the community? What are our terminal and landside options? So whether it be parking options, all those things that aren't the airfield, but on the other side of the terminal. And how could building size and function, number of gates, etc., best reflect our values and our planning goals moving forward? And again, we're going to be asking the experience group to look at those value statements that we talked about back in April, but also looking at, okay, given the target employments that we set collectively in these continua, the roughly 0.8% growth, you know, what are the design criteria for each of the functional areas of a terminal? From the experience committee's perspective, which one of those should be maybe increased, which should be decreased, which should be emphasized or de-emphasized? What are those turnaround times for gates? What are those likely aircraft likely to come in? What should the gate number be? Is it 8 like it is today? Is it 5? Is it 10? We need the experience committee, informed by our technical committee, to be looking at those factors and making a recommendation back. What will meet our goals? Okay, and our goals, as we've already identified them, and as we'll continue to identify. Okay? And ultimately, the Airport Experience Committee is going to be looking at that layout option then for the terminal and landside improvements. Community character group. We're going to be asking the community character group to really think, what's the big picture role of the airport in our community? And asking, how will our future airport fit the ASE vision, values, and the civic goals of the Aspen-Picking County community? And how should these goals inform planning for future operations of both general aviation and commercial service? Really, the Community Character Committee will be recommending what values and characteristics any future project at the airport should reflect and balance. These statements from the Community Character Committee will identify the success factors that will serve as the lens through which the Airport Vision Committee will view potential improvements when developing a final recommendation for the Board of County Commissioners. Examples of information that we're going to be asking the Community Character Committee to look at are some of those founding documents that have already documented some of those values and goals, whether it be the Aspen Area Community Plan, the Snowmass Comprehensive Plan, Caucus Master Plans, any other documents that already embody what some of those visions and values are, and relating them back to the airport project. The focus group. The primary focus of the focus group is how can we improve airport connectivity? What would a more convenient and easy ground transportation to and from the airport look like? How can we enhance multimodal transportation options and create seamless connectivity to transit? How does the airport fit into the broader surface transportation network of Aspen, Picking County, and the Roaring Fork Valley? We'll be working with our Regional Transportation Planning Administrator and be looking at documents like the Upper Valley Mobility Study, the Aspen Institute Community Forum Report on transportation, the record of decision for the entrance to Aspen and access control plans around the airport to understand what the opportunities are, what the limitations are, and how the airport can best fit into that transportation mode. What can we do to forward the visions that have been established, and what can we do to be a better player in terms of connectivity at the airport? The Vision Committee is going to continue to work. We're going to have a meeting together on August 26th to talk about our next steps as a Vision Committee while the working groups are working together to address these questions. For the working groups, your facilitators will be reaching out this week to start scheduling the next set of meetings so you can start to sink your teeth into this information and sink your teeth into these conversations. We do have some established meetings, meeting dates for plenary sessions where we're all together. Right now, those are set for September 18th, October 2nd, and November 13th, all at the Aspen Meadows. Working groups will be establishing their own meeting schedules to get at the questions that they're being asked to address by the Vision Committee and the community. So with that, there's probably going to be a lot of questions. A lot of these are going to be answered as the facilitators go. I did promise to try and get you out of here early. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take some questions if there are any.
Yeah, what were those two elements that you talked about besides the record of decision on the entrance of Aspen regarding the focus group assignment?
Yeah, so in our regional transportation planning administrator will be providing some background, but it will be informed by the Upper Valley Mobility Study. The Aspen Institute had a community forum that concluded, I guess I shouldn't say concluded work, but developed a report at the end of last year with recommendations for an integrated mobility solution for the upper Roaring Fork Valley. So you'd be looking at that. You'd be looking at what's called the record of decision, which was the environmental assessment, basically the FONSI for the EA on the entrance to Aspen. That you remember. We've all talked about that one a lot at different times, depending on how long you've been here. And then access control plans also would inform that. Yeah.
Has any committee explored making it the city and county airport, which would facilitate getting a system going into Aspen?
So the question was, has any committee explored making it a city and county airport? The answer is no, but there is a structure through the EOTC where the city and county and Snowmass Village cooperate on regional transportation planning. And the EOTC recently had a retreat where they did identify airport connectivity as one of those priorities. Yes.
In one of the previous master planning committees that I was on for the airport, there were a number of sketches and drawings and hypothetical two-story ramp plans that were put out, and that included the land side and the terminal side. And I think, because I've seen them, they might really enhance everybody's ability to grasp what changing the runway might be like, lengthening the runway, changing the terminal, splitting it in two pieces, building a new this, putting parking lots everywhere. There's already, you know, a lot of examples of architectural design and development done.
Thank you for bringing that up. And they, just since I'm on a mic, I'm going to repeat a little bit. The comment was there was a lot of work done during the environmental assessment process to inform the community of what improvements might look like and how they might be structured. And particularly for the technical committee, as well as the airport experience committee, starting with that work so that you know what's been approved in the FONSI, but you are not limited by it, would be a starting point, and then modifying from there to meet our community goals. So that work will be available. Thank you. Okay, I see people on the edge of their seat, so I am going to let you go. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and we look forward to future meetings.